Hello. Okay, so today I thought I'd share with you my ongoing process of researching, plotting, writing, and publishing the post-capitalist sci-fi fantasy epic that I am writing. The project is currently titled Project Anchor, and in this video I am going to discuss why I'm writing this book and where the inspiration came from, the research phase, and how I am plotting. And then if you stick around until the end, I am going to reveal the inciting incident of the story. Okay, all right, let's do it. Okay, so if you see me looking down, it's because I have my notes here and just going through it. So why am I writing this book? What was the spark? As you all can tell, if you're living in this world in 2026, then you look outside, the world is kind of shit, kind of very shit. And it's a pretty depressing state of the world that we're living in. And at this point, I think we all know that capitalism is the problem. It is the issue. And I think we're in the stage now where we're getting that message thrown at us from so many angles. Capitalism is the problem, techno-feudalism, and all of these buzzwords. And the thing that I found distressing about everything is that, yes, we know what the problem is, but what is the solution? How do we get out of it? How do we change things? There are very few people that are touching on that subject at the moment, or at least it's very hard to find those voices. One of the things that actually made me feel like taking action is this quote that I read, which I think is from David Graeber, the anthropologist, that says, "It is easier to imagine the end of the world than to imagine the end of capitalism." And when I read that, it felt experientially true, but it's a very depressing thought. And I didn't like it. And I am the kind of person where, okay, everything is shite, but what do we do about it? I need a solution. So I started looking for solutions. So I started researching alternative solutions, and I found some great resources, which I'll discuss further down, that offered some answers. I had some like nuggets of answer here and there. We need to build community. We need to do mutual aid and X, Y, and Z. But that all felt like drops in the ocean. And nothing really felt like we have a really clear path for how we're going to overhaul this. How do we make the transition from capitalism to something different? And what is that something different going to look like? How would we organize that on not just personal scale, but also on a global scale? As a reader, I did the thing that I do, which is turn to books. What I found in most science fiction stories, they're very much focused on ending the old system, which great, amazing, let's end the old system. But the part that I was missing is, okay, now that the system has ended, what is going to replace it? The hero has done their thing, they've brought down the empire. Okay, cool, we have won. What is replacing that? What is the system that is now coming into play? Because with the system, yes, you cut off the head of the Hydra, 3 more grow. So if you're all about, oh, let's go on this crusade and burn empire, sure, what then? How are you feeding the people? How are the people being fed? How are the people being looked after? The people on the street who haven't fought with you on that battlefield, who have no idea, who are like a world away from what is happening, how are they being taken care of? So I wanted to explore what that would look like in our world. And as I was doing my research, I was finding more and more of those answers. I was finding the answers of people who are already doing things right now, who are going against the system as it is. And it's going to be a long road to get out of this, but we can do it. Being an artist and being a writer and loving writing, I think art and artists in general, we play a key role in imagining how things could be and then projecting that out into the world so that more people can relate. Because here's the thing, it's hard to make something happen when you cannot imagine it beforehand. Does that make sense? And as the quote says, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism. So when I read that quote, I was like, you know what? I accept the challenge. I accept the challenge. I am going to put together all of these resources that I have found. I'm going to pull all of that together, and I am going to write a story, a sci-fi fantasy, because it's one of my favorite genres, a sci-fi fantasy story that imagines a version of the world after capitalism has been booted out and something else has come to replace it. That's basically the inspiration. This is what the spark is. I am writing this book to answer the following question for myself, which is, how do we free ourselves from the shackles of capitalism and our billionaire overlords? And what does a post-capitalism world look like and function? So that's the beginning. With that question in front of me now, I dove back into research. I think my earnest research phase for the book started around September of 2025. The research was focused on understanding as best as I can how the world actually works right now. So that meant doing deep dives into economics, geopolitics, biology, AI research and quantum computing, astrophysics, psychology, philosophy, anthropology, as many varied sources as possible. Lucky for me, I am generally a very curious person and I love going down rabbit holes and going full hyperfixation mode on things. So for me, the stage was equally enlightening, but also depressing at times, because once you start to understand how things really work, it's like, okay, fuck, we are fucked, but we're not completely fucked. We can still get out of this. Some of the resources, I will have them linked in descriptions below, include here on YouTube Professor Chang lectures. He is basically giving these lectures on how the world is set up. It's a great resource, but I will say you should take some of his explanations of how things work with a grain of salt. Just don't inject what he says as the one and absolute truth, but do some additional research, because I'm finding a lot of people now are just taking in everything he says as like gospel and just accepting every single thing, even though he says some really questionable shit in those lectures. A lot of the things are interesting. The questionable shit that he says, me personally, it makes me want to dive into those specific aspects, because there's some stuff that he says and I'm like, what do you mean? And then I go do some research for myself to basically see, okay, right, this is, do you see what I mean? He's a great guy. He does a great service to us on YouTube by providing all of these lectures for free. But once again, he has one particular vision of the world, and the way that he understands the world is very much based on his experience. So do your own research is all I'm trying to say. Another resource I really love, Startup Podcast with Neil deGrasse Tyson. Amazing. They don't just talk about astrophysics. They have so many guests across all of the sciences, and there are some really, really interesting ideas being shared on that podcast that really help me with my world building and with exploring different ideas. One channel that I really love, and I feel like much more people should be subscribed to and watching, is Realism here on YouTube, who is basically an anarchist communist, and a lot of my resources about solar punk, anarchist movements and stuff like that is coming from him. He provides a lot of resources that have helped me to go and do even more research and find different sources that I could take in. Our Changing Climate is another one of those channels. There's so many out there, and of course books, so many books, more than I can count. I could do a separate video on some of the books that are inspiring the story that I'm writing, if that is interesting to people. To me, it's very interesting, and there's a lot of books across so many different subjects and genres that I am puiser. What is puiser in English? Puiser, translate. Google. Puiser. Draw. Really? Draw? As a drawing? Okay. I forgot the sentence that I'm drawing from. Puiser, draw, okay. That I'm drawing from. All these sources is how I learned about mutual aid, solar punk, anarchist communism, freedom of associations, all of these concepts, all of these ideas, and all of these ways that people are creating new and different types of communities and arrangements to try and, as much as possible, detach from the capitalist system that we're in at the moment. Of course, I also researched the craft of writing, because this just happened. I chose to write this book in English, which is not my mother tongue. So yay. There is a challenge there around making sure that my idea comes over correctly. So yes, there's a lot of research around the craft of writing, around world building, around crafting compelling characters and story arcs. I've had many versions of the wall behind me. This is the previous version of the wall. This is whiteboard sheets that you can just stick to the wall and then you write. And then once you're done, you just take it down, and I can use the entire wall space and then keep these. I've done so much research. These are all ideas that haven't made it to the wall, or they were on the wall at some point, but as I was doing my research, they didn't fit anymore. But I'm still keeping them because I will be consulting them again. This is a pile of research. I think on paper, first and foremost. It might not be productive, but I am very much anti-productivity. So this is the research that I did around creating a magic system. I collected all of my research into this bundle. This was a random story that I came across, which felt interesting that I might integrate. This, I think, is Enneagram research. This is a folktale research. So at this stage, I had a question, but I had no premise yet, because it's all great and well doing all of this research and knowing how things work in the real world. But ultimately, what I was trying to do is I was trying to build a fictional story where I can actually put these ideas to work and explore how they would look like in a fictional setting. So for that, I needed to have a premise. What is the story? How is it starting? How is it going? How is it ending? Because, and I believe truly in the forces of the universe, because the universe knew that I was aligned in this pursuit that was so dear to me, obviously it came to my assistance, because that's what the universe does most of the time. The start of the story came to me in a dream. Classic. The beginning of the story came to me in a dream, and then the end of the story came to me later that same day when I was out on a run. I was running. I had the beginning of the story in my mind the whole entire day, and I was ruminating on it. As I was running, all of a sudden, the end of the story just hit me, and it just played so vividly in my mind, like a movie, like I was in there living it. And it was so emotional, and it was so overwhelming that I just started bawling in the street. Luckily for me, it was the middle of the night and there was no one around to witness it, unless you count the trees and the moon. They were just looking like, girl, what the fuck? I was bawling my eyes out because all of a sudden I had like the beginning of the story in my mind, and the end, it just felt so emotional and just so, I knew that I was onto something. And by the way, if you stick around until the end, I will tell you what the beginning of the story is. So now at this point, I had my question, and then I had the inciting incident, and I knew how it would end the entire trilogy. Oh, by the way, did I say that it was going to be a trilogy? It's going to be a trilogy. 3-story, maybe a couple of novellas here and there. So inciting incident, check. The end, check. The question that will be explored, also check. But something was still missing. I couldn't sit down and write the story just yet because, for one, I have discovered that I am what they call a plotter. I need a well laid out plan before I can begin, even though I know of myself that I love to make a plan and then side-eye the plan and just go do something else, which is probably what is going to happen. But I still need that plan. In this case, would that be the case? No, because I've just finished a short story. I made the plan and I loved having the plan, and I actually followed the plan. I would say 90%. I only changed maybe 10%, so that's not too bad. Anyway, that's not the point. I cannot start without having a plan, and there was something missing for me to set up the plan. I sat down, I research 3-act structure, Save the Cat, and I thought I would use those to help me. And when I sat down to try and use them, it wasn't working. Something wasn't working. Something wasn't clicking. I realized that before I could start plotting properly, I needed to know the beginning, middle, and end events for all 3 books first. I couldn't do that yet because I didn't have enough information. There were some key elements about what actually is the magic system, what's the source of it, who gets to have it, who gets to use it. There's questions like that, just general questions around the world that I needed to answer before beginning, middle, and end of all 3 parts of the book made sense. So those are 9 key events that I needed to figure out even before I started plotting. For the next few months, I spent so much time just writing down random scenes as they came to me. I wrote pages upon pages of just the random scenes as they came to me while I continued researching to try and figure out what my 9 key events across the entire trilogy were going to be. At one point, I had a whole hyperfixation on map making for a week or two. I dropped that pretty quickly when I realized that I couldn't lay out the land without answering some other questions first. So I put that to the side as well. I continued reading, watching videos, researching until once again the universe came and nudged me. I had been at this in September 2025, right? And now we're in March. Last weekend, YouTube recommended me this video. And as soon as I started playing it, everything just clicked into place. All the different pieces that had been floating around in this first version of my wall, and all of these like notes that I was collecting, and all of the different story pieces that I was jotting down, watching that video and all the way through, everything just clicked into place. I had the beginning, middle, end of all of the 3 parts of that trilogy, and actually I realized I could write some extra novellas in between as well, because I might need a bit more space, a bit more room to explore all of the thoughts that this video had just like put into place. I had my magic system, I had my technology and the means to explain how the technology worked. I had the angle I would build the conflict of the story around. I had all of my key players. They're all there right now. Don't bother zooming in, you won't see anything. And I had the transformation arc for one of my main characters, arguably my main character. I had her transformation arc just laid out. All of that just fell into place because you never know where you're going to hear the thing that's going to just fire the neuron that is going to make the right connections for you. And with that, I spent the entirety of last weekend literally just fleshing out what I'm calling the draft 0 of the story. On this side, I have the key players. On this side of the wall, I have the metaphysical of the world. Up there, the destruction plan of how do we get rid of the system. And then down there is what do we replace it with and how we go about replacing it, and some examples of what that would look like, and then some other bits and bobs that I worked out. And then by 1 a.m. in the morning, I was so fired up that I sat down and I wrote down in about 3 hours what I would now consider draft 0 of Project Anchor, which is right here. With that, I finally had a draft 0 of my book, of my books, I should say, 3 books, that I can now start playing with. This even includes a whole Genesis story that I made up, which is based on the creation mythology for my birth country in West Africa, which is really cool. I have a draft 0 right now. So now, you think I'm going to start writing? No. Now I'm going to actually properly plot the story. The research that I was doing was, of course, how to plot a book. And I've read your hero's journey, your 3-act structure, your Save the Cat, and all of that. And as great as those were, the foolscap method, actually that one was really good because that's the one that helped me decide that I needed beginning, middle, and end for all of the books before I could begin. Shout out to the foolscap method as the bare bones beginning. Now, from all of the research that I've done, the plotting books and the plotting style that really resonated with me were the Anatomy of books by John Truby, which were Anatomy of Story and Anatomy of Genre. And these are the ones that I found fit best with the way that my mind works, with how I like to organize things, where it's flexible enough that it doesn't tie you into this like super rigid system, but at the same time it gives you enough guidelines for what you need and what to look out for. I am a paper person, and because I couldn't get those books in print where I am right now. I had to get them on ebook, read them on my iPad, and then I basically recapped those 2 books into this workbook for myself. And now that I have the draft 0 and I know the big lines of the story, this is where I'm going to go in and follow this workbook. And there are 10 steps plotting, and this is all plotting, by the way, I'm not writing anything yet. There are 10 steps that are outlined here that are going to help me really plot this book in detail. It's going to go from refining the premise, working out the 7 key structures of a story, fleshing out the characters, fleshing out the themes and moral arguments, fleshing out the story world, the symbol, web. Then we get to work on the plot in card format. Then we get to work on the scene, weaves how the different scenes come together. Then we're going to work on scene construction and dialogue. And I also have steps that are specific to the genre of the story that I am writing. Anyway, this is a whole thing of its own. If you're interested, I will be sharing how I'm going through this process as much as I can. That's the plan with the channel. I will be sharing that. Yeah, that's the next really big thing that I will be doing. I'm going to refine the story, make sure that all the different beats land, create engaging characters with great emotional payoff. Because ultimately, I want to create a handbook for how we get rid of capitalism and then replace it with something better, sure. But at the end of the day, I am a lover of stories and a lover of good stories. And I think crafting great stories is one of the ways that we can really share our message and really get people to connect with what we're trying to share. I want people that read my stories and that read these stories, or any story that I write really, to be in equal parts inspired, moved, and engaged by my stories. So I need to do the work. I want for people who end up picking any of my stories and end up picking any of my books to feel that I, as a writer, that I respect them. There's nothing I hate more than reading a book where I feel like the writer doesn't respect their readers and doesn't trust the reader. And I want to craft something that is engaging, interesting, and I want to do the work to make sure that it is the best possible version that I can create. I have a full schedule, actually, of what the rest of the process is going to be for me, because as you can tell, I like to plan. I am a planner. I'm a plotter. So I have a full schedule. Now that I've written draft 0, I know what my focus is going to be for draft 1, for draft 2, 3. I think I'm going to have at least 4 drafts before I show this to anyone. And each draft has a different focus, is the plan in my head. If you'd like to see that, and if you'd like me to share that, if that would be interesting for you to see, let me know in the comment below. But yeah, that's my project anchor journey so far. I hope all of that made sense. Besides this, I have 3 other works in progress. One is a psychological mystery novella. It's not quite long. It's too long to be a short story. It's not quite long enough to be a novella. So it's like that in between, a novelette. I'm planning to release that this autumn. I have written, can you see? It's this little blue top here. That's the draft 1 of that one. I'm probably going to be sharing myself editing that. That might be interesting. I have another sci-fi project which is in the researching stage at the moment. I'm calling it Project Revenants. And then I also have a collection of horror short stories, because I am very interested in horror and I feel drawn to writing horror. And I have a lot of really fucked up little, I call them my seedlings. These are these little stories that are just a bit weird and I think would fit in the horror genre. I have a Scrivener folder that's called My Seedlings, and it's all just weird little stories in there. So I might drop those in a collection of horror short stories, and also some poetry. I'm exploring writing poetry, so I might share that as well. I don't know. If you're still here, thank you. And if any of this sounds interesting and you want to follow the journey, feel free to subscribe. My plan is to document as much as I can, but I make no promises. I'm not going to have a schedule or anything like that, because I'm not one of those. I like to plan, but at the same time, I don't like to be tied up by a plan. Yeah, so my plan is to document the entire process all the way to publication. So if you want to see videos about how I use the Enneagram to craft my character's internal world, oh my god, this book, if you are not, look at this is well annotated. If you are not on the wagon of using this to help craft your character's inner world, what are you doing? This is basically a cheat sheet. But if you pick a type, it gives you a clear outline of how would this type behave to go from integration to disintegration. So they would basically go from everything is fine to everything is shit. How would they deal with different setbacks and stuff? If you don't know how to write character inner worlds and how to write conflict and how to write subtext, and you're not committing this and just having this as your Bible beside you, what are you doing? Why are you making your life harder for yourself when this exists? But also, if you do the test for yourself, this is going to drag you. This dragged me. Read me for filth about myself. Love it. So if you want to see a video about how I build characters with this, let me know. How I practice writing, because once again, I'm not a native English speaker. I have to actually practice writing prose in English, which, and just general struggles of trying to be a writer in 2026. I don't know. If you're a writer yourself, I would love to know what your process is like. Let's be friends. Let's connect. Let's chat. Let's maybe have, writer groups. I don't know. I am new on the internet. No, I'm not, but I am. Anyway, thank you for sticking around until the end. And I didn't forget, as I promised, here is the inciting incident of Project Anchor. So my main character, her name is Olivia. I'm calling her Olivia for now. I think I'm going to keep it. Olivia's life gets turned upside down when the brother she didn't know she had turns up unannounced at her door and solicits her help to find their mother, a woman who Olivia has never known and considers no more than a stranger. And from there, I don't know, shit hits the fan. Things happen. Stick around to find out how that leads to the end of things as we know it. So, yeah, that's it. I'm done. Okay, thank you. Bye.